Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, we begin with the event political watchers have been waiting for weeks, and the candidates have been preparing for days. The first debate between President Biden and Donald Trump is just hours away. Trump is already setting expectations.
Am I going to get a fair? Probably not. But it would be very good for CNN. They're having a lot of ratings problems. I think it would be very good for CNN, actually.
The former president phoned into a black-owned barbershop in Atlanta, the city where the debate is being held tonight at CNN studios. We have team coverage of the CNN presidential debate, beginning with Bloomberg's Joe Matthew, who says this event's happening much earlier than usual in the election cycle.
There was clearly an effort here or a thought by the Biden campaign that we do this early to call Donald Trump's bluff on whether he even wanted to debate. And by the way, who knows if everyone shows up still? I'll believe it when I see it. But also to get to the age issue, they want to knock this thing down before we get into the throes of conventions.
Bloomberg's Joe Matthew says the debate could lead to missteps for Biden or Trump. They are both the oldest major party candidates to compete for the White House.
Well, Nathan, the return to the debate stage for these two candidates comes with new rules, and Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has that part of the story.
The rules have been drafted by CNN and agreed to by both campaigns. First moderators, Jake Tapper, Dana Bash, and their control room will have control of the mics. And the mics will be muted unless it is the candidate's turn to speak. Second, there will be no live studio audience to react to what traditionally have been called moments in the past debates. Biden won the coin flip, meaning he will stand at the lectern to the speaker's right, and Trump will get the closing statement. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Ed, thanks. So we invite you to join us for our special coverage of the CNN presidential debate. It begins at 8 p.m. Wall Street time with a special edition of Balance of Power with Joe Matthew and Kayleigh Lines in Washington and David Gura in Atlanta. Listen to the debate on Bloomberg Radio or watch it on Bloomberg Television.
Karen, there's also a highly watched political showdown overseas. Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak had their final televised leaders debate of the UK general election campaign. Economic proposals featured heavily during the BBC event as Labour leader Starmer set out his party's plans on taxes.
We have set out in our manifesto all of our plans that we will not be increasing income tax, national insurance or VAT.
Keir Starmer also labeled the Prime Minister as out of touch with voters, while Rishi Sunak retorted by questioning the clarity of Labour's own fiscal proposals.
I've set out my plans clearly, and I appreciate, actually, that not everyone's going to agree with me. Keir Starmer is not being straight with you about his plans to raise your taxes. I don't think that's leadership.
Prime Minister Sunak also repeated previous claims that a Labour government would raise the tax burden, which Starmer said was false.
Well, we turn to the markets now, Nathan, and futures are lower following disappointing earnings from a high-tech flyer. We get the latest from Bloomberg's John Tucker. John, good morning.
And Karen, Micron Technology shares down 6% pre-market. The largest U.S. maker of memory chips delivering an outlook roughly in line with the average analyst estimate, but they're being punished for not outperforming the elevated expectations. The company says fourth quarter sales are going to be as high as $7.8 billion. Micron had rallied 67% this year before yesterday's close. Lifted by expectations, is going to be one of the main beneficiaries of AI spending. Their chips stand out for their memory capabilities. For AI chips altogether, big jumps at market value have been vulnerable to rapid correction, as shown by NVIDIA earlier this week when its shares entered correction territory on Monday before bouncing back. I'm in New York. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, John, thank you. We're also watching shares of International Paper. They are down 15% in early trading. Brazil's Suzano says it is ending its takeover pursuit of IP. Suzano says it was never able to draw the company into serious engagement and wasn't willing to increase its offer. The decision removes a complication to International Paper's plan to acquire DS Smith.
Well, Nathan, shares of Levi also taking a big hit this morning. They're down more than 15%. The denim maker reported sales in its latest quarter that slightly missed expectations, underscoring Wall Street's high expectations for the company.
And a big retailer overseas is taking it on the chin as well this morning, Karen. Shares of H&M are down 13%. The fashion company reported weaker than expected profit for the second quarter and also said sales slumped at the start of June as poor weather kept shoppers at home.
Well, we're also following bank stocks this morning, Nathan. This after the country's biggest banks passed the Federal Reserve's annual stress test. Let me get the details with Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
It paves the way for higher shareholder payouts as the industry awaits a watered-down version of a separate proposal for stricter capital rules. The Fed said each firm stayed above its minimum capital requirements during a hypothetical recession. Altogether, the group would take nearly $685 billion in losses, driving a larger drop in capital than in last year's scenario, but, quote, within the range of recent stress tests. This round of the annual exam, a product of the 2008 financial crisis, included 31 banks, each with at least $100 billion in assets. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Charlie, thanks. In New Jersey, budget committees in the state Senate and Assembly have approved a tax hike on the largest companies doing business in the Garden State. It's expected to get a floor vote later this week. More on that from Bloomberg's Doug Krisner.
Leaders in the Democratic-controlled legislature agreed to the so-called corporate transit fee. The aim is to help fund New Jersey's financially stressed public transportation system. It was pitched earlier this year in Governor Murphy's state budget. A 2.5% fee will be added to the state's 9% corporate tax rate on businesses with New Jersey net taxable income above $10 million. Now, around 600 of the wealthiest companies, names like Walmart and Amazon, are expected to pay the fee. It's forecast to generate roughly $1 billion in revenue annually. In New York, I'm Doug Krisner, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Doug, thank you. Well, turning to the economy now, we are just 1 day away from the Fed's preferred inflation rating, the PCE deflator. Despite the results, Dominic Constam, the head of macro strategy at Mizuho Securities, says the Fed should start cutting interest rates.
I would definitely be in the camp of cutting 2 or 3 times this year, and then and then sort of adding another sort of 100 basis point easing at least in the sort of first half of next year. Policy is restrictive. Inflation does look to me is under control, and it's the last thing you want is for it to fall below target.
And Mizuho Securities' Dominic Constam, Bloomberg Economics expects May's monthly core PCE inflation reading to be the slowest yet this year. And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. It was a rough travel day at airports in New York and Washington, D.C. Several major airports along the East Coast had to pause flights because of severe weather. Departures to Newark, Kennedy, and LaGuardia airports were grounded until early this morning because of thunderstorms. In the Washington area, departures to the Baltimore, Dulles, and Reagan airports were grounded last night. In Bolivia, chanting crowds lit fireworks outside the presidential palace as rebel soldiers dispersed after a failed coup attempt against the nation's socialist government. President Luis Arce thanked supporters from the balcony of the same building into which an army unit had earlier driven a tank in an attack. It is likely to bolster his embattled administration as it grapples with shortages of fuel and hard currency. The U.S. Supreme Court is poised to allow abortions in medical emergencies in Idaho, according to a copy of an opinion that was briefly posted on the court's website. The decision would reinstate a lower court order that ensured hospitals in the state could perform emergency abortions to protect the health of the mother. First Lady Dr. Jill Biden hosted a Pride Month celebration at the White House. The First Lady says pride is a celebration and a declaration to not be silenced.
I'm so happy to be here with my daughter as we celebrate your families. Those families that you're born into, the ones you build, and the ones you choose.
Hundreds of guests were on the South Lawn for the event that also included live music. Heading to the U.S., some VIPs, very important pandas. They are on their way to the San Diego Zoo from China as part of a 30-year alliance with the China Wildlife Conservation Association. The 2 giant pandas were off in a send-off ceremony yesterday in the Chinese province of Sichuan, and it was attended by a number of Chinese and American dignitaries, including San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria.
On behalf of the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance and every San Diegan, it is a profound honor to be entrusted with the care and conservation of these 2 giant pandas. Yoon Chuan and Sing Tao.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Karen.
VIPs. All right, Michael Barr, thank you. And it's time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Here's John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Pretty amazing how the tables have recently turned in New York baseball. Mets are hot, Yankees are not. It was on full display in the two-game Subway Series at Citi Field. Mets won them both, getting the sweep with a 12-2 rout. The night after hitting 4 home runs, they hit 3 more. Harrison Bader again homered in both games against his old team. Francisco Alvarez, 3 hits. He hit a 2-run homer. Later, Tyrone Taylor, a 3-run shot. Mets have won 15 of their last 19. They are at 500 for the first time since May 10th. Their manager is Carlos Mendoza.
We were a few weeks ago, to be in this position now. It's important, knowing that we still got work to do and we got long ways to go, but continue the same approach, one day at a time, one game at a time, one series at a time.
As for the Yankees, a little more than 2 weeks ago, they had played 20 series and only lost 2. Since then, they played 4 series, lost them all, 3-9 in their last 12 games. Their only bright spot continues to be Aaron Judge. He hit his 30th home run. He's ahead of his pace from 2 years ago when he hit 62. The Orioles ended a 5-game losing streak, 4-2 over Cleveland, and Baltimore is only a game behind the Yanks. The NBA Draft's first round held in Brooklyn. They'll have round 2 tonight. French teenagers led the way the year after Victor Wembanyama went first overall. Atlanta began the night taking Zachary Rizache. Washington followed with Alex Starr, a 7-footer. Another youngster from France went 6th overall. And the Knicks took an 18-year-old from France. Although the bigger story for the Knicks, the ESPN report that OG Anunoby is staying in New York after opting out, becoming a free agent. He'll get 5 years, $212 million. With Anunoby in the lineup last season, the Knicks' record was 26-6. They named the roster for the U.S. Women's Olympic Soccer squad, and a longtime star of the team, Alex Morgan, now 34, got cut. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Karen and Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. Well, any last-minute preparation for the first debate between President Biden and former President Trump is going to have to happen in the next few hours. The rematch begins tonight at 9 p.m. Wall Street time in the CNN presidential debate. And ahead of it, we're joined by Tina Fordham, the founder and geopolitical strategist at Fordham Global Foresight. Tina, good morning. I don't think we've had any two better-known candidates heading into a debate than the two that we're going to meet tonight. How much could this debate really change voters' minds?
Well, more than debates typically do, right? So, first of all, the timing. This U.S. presidential debate comes earlier in the cycle than normal, and there is more riding on this contest where we have so many registered independents and so many voters who dislike both candidates.
When you have that level of dislike, though, I mean, with it coming this early, I mean, can this debate really have an impact on how voters come down in November?
Well, they definitely can. This is the first time we'll see these two candidates side by side since 2020, I think. The level of the narrative is such that if Joe Biden manages to stand up and be sentient, he's winning. Such has been the low expectations for him. And the bar is lower for Trump. He's a reality TV star, of course. And he will get, I think, a huge points for making any kind of policy discussion that's sane and credible. But it'll be a form of entertainment, especially for political junkies like me.
Yeah, these debates tend to be that way. I mean, we always look for the style points, but is there a chance for substance to break through in a format where the mics are going to be cut off when they're not talking and there's not going to be an audience?
So those are two unprecedented changes. Trump, of course, thrives on his studio audience. And that's where there is room for, surprises on the upside and the downside. The cutting off of mics, they both need to keep their cool. Remember, in the last debate, Joe Biden was heard muttering under his breath, shut up, man. Will they get on each other's nerves, or will they talk about the issues that matter most to Americans, which is the economy and inflation?
And so on those issues in particular, could we see this as a market moving event, depending on what kinds of points the candidates make this evening?
I think one of them would have to suffer an extreme physical event for it to be market moving, and not that anyone wishes for that. But I think when we have such high disapproval ratings for both candidates, and so many independents who dislike both, the so-called double haters, it's important. Also, the fact that the debate is taking place before the conventions for the parties, July for Republicans and August for Democrats, there is some chance for what I call the Democrats' kind of fantasy outcome to transpire, which is that if Biden looks like he's really not up to the job, could he be somehow convinced to stand down? I consider that very low probability, but it's not zero.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.